In spring of 2014, high levels of lead were found in the water system of Flint, Michigan. As many of you are aware, lead is really bad for the health. It affects your brain, it affects your organs, it affects your skin, basically your whole body. But the question is, how did that lead get into the water system of Flint, Michigan? Fellow Toastmasters, good morning. Today I'm going to talk about what happened in Flint, Michigan with their water system and why. So let's get started with the timeline. In 2013, the city decided they wanted to reduce costs with water, and they started looking for their options. They were currently obtaining water from the city of Detroit, and during that time, a water authority was constructing a pipeline that was getting water from Lake Huron. And so it would take about 3 years for the construction to be complete, and that was not really an option for them at that time. They wanted a short-term option. So what they decided to do was to obtain water from a local river in Flint. It sounded like a good plan, and by the following year, in 2014, in April to be exact, they decided to change their water source from Detroit water to the Flint River. And immediately in May, the residents were already complaining. Awful smell, bad taste, bad coloring in the water, anything you can imagine, just water you would not want to drink. The city was denying there were any issues, but the residents knew there were issues. Eventually, in August 15, there was a boil water advisory, which meant that if you were going to consume the water, you had to boil your water. In October, the Flint General Motors had their plant there, and they noticed that the parts were getting corroded. The water was affecting their parts. And eventually they came into an agreement with the city, and they were able to give them a different source of water. They tapped into a different connection, and they had good water. But this only happened with the plant, not with the residents. In 2015, basically a year later, the issue is still going on, and there's high levels of trihalomethanes. What is this? It basically affects your organs. It affects your liver, your lungs, your heart, your kidneys. It's bad for your body. And how did this get into the water? Well, the water was being treated with chlorine. It was injected, and in combination with debris, with algae, with leaves, it was creating this chemical that was bad for the body. So everybody knew that there was contamination in the water, but there was a slow process. There really nothing was happening to help out the residents at that time. And to top it off, most of the piping in that area was of lead pipe. It started getting constructed in the late 1800s, and it was affecting their water system. So finally, in October of 2015, the city finally decides to switch back to Detroit water. At this time, the damage has already been done, and water is poor quality water. Children were testing very high levels of lead, and it was affecting people. There was death. It was incredibly bad for the health. It was bad for everyone. So this is what the levels should be. Any type of lead consumption is bad, but EPA, Environmental Protection Agency, had a limit, which was 15 parts per billion. That's nothing, really. The city of the Detroit water had 2.3 below levels, but in Flint, Michigan, it was almost 1,000 times higher, which was 13,000 parts per billion of lead. Insane. It was really, really high. So this is what the water looked like. This is the water from Detroit, clear water.
Wow.
And the water for Flint. So as you can see, it's orange, brown, really bad. So residents are complaining. It's a very, very slow process. And finally, in 2016, the U.S. government steps in. There's a state of emergency. President Obama signs a pledge where they're going to get $80 million to help the city get back into shape. Now, eventually what they recognized was there was chemistry in the water. There was high levels of salt in the river, high levels of chlorine, and the plant wasn't being treated properly. They just went ahead and started with this plan without really thinking, without properly testing. They just switched the water source, not thinking what was going to happen with the piping. So let me show you what happened. This is a pipe. This is a regular lead pipe. It looks clean. There's a layer that's being formed on the pipe, which is basically Detroit Water was injecting phosphate. So it was creating a crust which protected the water from getting in contact with the pipe, so there was no lead levels at that time. But when they switched, the crust started going into the water system, and that's where the residents started seeing the water is turning brown, the water tastes bad. So the water turning brown was actually from iron pipe, so as you can see, it was a disaster. The pipe was basically corroded. So this is what the pipes looked at that time. It was just a mess, and this is really what happened with when a city or just anybody just switches over from one source to another without really taking proper testing, without planning this. They just made a decision, and within a year they switched over. And I just want to finish off with saying that the Flint River is a variable water source and a challenge to treat. Oversights and missteps combined with inherent chemical conditions set the stage for the historic water crisis in Flint, Michigan. So I'm pretty sure, has everybody heard about this issue that happened? Did anybody not hear about it? I mean, I had heard about it. I knew there was lead contamination, but when I started researching and looking more into it and just seeing all these pictures, it was pretty bad for everyone, right? And just so you know, they're still trying to replace water mains, because it didn't just affect the water system, it affected the homes. All the homes, their plumbing needs to get replaced, and it's very costly. There's still a lot of repair that needs to be made, and it's just a very long process. And we're hoping that with this issue that happened, it could create awareness for other water companies, and just think about the decisions that they make. There's still a lot of lawsuits, and I'm not going to get into those details. I just wanted to share with everybody what happened and why.